The soul is the purity of personhood, your personhood with God, the eternal person of who you are with God, your uniqueness, your individuality, your personhood in the host of heaven with all the other souls. Your eternal being manifested in the spiritual. The Jesus story we have, what would a man give in exchange for his soul? It is your eternal and infinite treasure, gift from God, your individuality, your loved being, treasured in heaven, in the heart of God. Ever utterly devoted to his presence by his grace. It's who you are eternally. The soul is the who that you are, your being, your personhood, not the persona as in a mask, but the very essence of who you are with God eternally. Bless you. Thank you, Dad. The soul is then your eternal contact with God. It cannot be shared with others. It is purely and utterly how God sees you, how he has you. It cannot be altered or affected by anything else. It is solely the you with God. Eternal, unique, ever the same, a person in your own right, personhood in your own right. Eternally bonding you with God, your Heavenly Father. It is the very essence then of the Jesus story concerned with the name of God being Father, the reason for the prodigal being able to return is because of this eternal relationship. In the bosom of the Father, of your very self. Bonded forever in the very being of God. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Thank you, Dad. The soul is then your singularity with God. Utterly unaffected by anything, all other souls. Even God himself. You are held as a unique, separate person. To be his company forever. That he quite simply be not alone. You are the reason for his living. An eternal company. Our Heavenly Father's meaning to life. We are his children. And his joy. And he is our eternal blessedness and heritage. Heritage and blessing. Together we sing the song without end. Thank you, Dad. You may have noticed in our listing that the soul comes second. We love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind and strength. Because first comes the love that brought the soul into being. This great longing, this great yearning for company, eternal company that our Heavenly Father had. Expressed now in an ever-eternal expanding number of souls without end. The vast and eternal family of God, host of heaven. Our mind is ever occupied with the relationship with God and all that he values. And our strength is all our creative spirit, all our creative intention, the all of our purposing. These four are utterly to be devoted to God eternally. This is the life eternal. Thank you, Dad. I've said before that this universe is the place, so to speak, of your conception into life eternal, from not being to ever being, past, present and future. That is the reason for the universe. To bring souls into being. To be able to manifest as full members of the host of heaven. Heart, soul, mind and strength. Devoted to God and all that he loves. Life eternal. Our Heavenly Father is wonderful. Utterly, utterly, utterly wonderful. Thank you, Dad. The means, the practice of childhood in this universe of space, time and matter and uncertainty and therefore change, creativity, is thankfulness, praise and gratitude. Praise of God and thankfulness to him generates the life being, the blood that we recognize as gratitude, and from which springs life eternal. Practice thankfulness. Practice praise, which is the awareness of all that is good, ascribed to the Creator of such, our Heavenly Father. And practice thankfulness to him for all of such good. You will quickly come to know that because of our Heavenly Father, all that is created is good. And you will achieve an eternal bonding your very soul. Life eternal. With our Heavenly Father, and therefore all the host of heaven. Thank you, Dad. You see, the conception is where God separates, if you like, a cell of himself in spiritual terms. It's deprived of the presence of God as regards its consciousness. It's separated. Experiences without reflection, and then upon reflection just the absence of God, or the separateness, the unconsciousness, and then moves into a state of what we call normal consciousness, namely of the physical universe. Now this is really the state of deprivation, because you're aware of the physical universe, of what manifests to you as good and evil, but you don't see it as either, it just is. And you are now conceived into the universe of uncertainty, time, space, and matter. And you're on the childhood process until you graduate to being an adult for the kingdom of heaven. In it, in fact, fully, by which I mean fully conscious of God, your Heavenly Father. And the host of heaven. So what we call the bulk of human existence is this training, with some early months of just being in the world, not, well, as a human being, and possibly animal life, one is experiencing becoming conscious, by which we mean distinguishing between good and evil. I hope that what we might disparagingly call the lower forms of life are not distinguishing good and evil, they simply are acting and reacting to. Having said that, their reactions indicate thought, for they panic and they try and move out of danger. So I really feel that all life itself means it's been conceived. If it appears as life here, on, if you like, planet Earth, then it's life. Because it seems to show avoidance behavior, what we would call fear, and therefore is already distinguishing between what it understands to be good and evil for itself, and probably therefore suffering pain, almost certainly suffering pain. Now, plants don't seem to have the ability to move out the way of, except they grow in the right direction, of course. You know, they grow towards the light, away from the very large bush that's overshadowing them or next to them, you know? Well, I really don't know. It's conjecture, and it's still being steered by what I hope to be the case, by which I mean what I want given my values at present. Thank you, Dad. Look, it may be the case that put it this way, when we're awake, we are in the conscious state and we're conscious of whatever we're conscious of in the physical world, and what's helpful to us and what isn't, and so forth, in some measure. But when we fall asleep, perhaps we are returning to the consciousness of God, and we rejuvenate. In other words, we reassess and regenerate for the period of waking state in this universe of being conscious of the physical and really unconscious of our relationship to God in large measure. Except in the case, in as far as we have an affinity with what we understand to be good and an aversion to what we understand to be bad from our point of view, which is, from our deprived point of view of consciousness, the waking state. And the sleeping state may not be. It may be where you keep track with God on what the conscious state situation is going to be. In other words, sleep is vital to the progress of the independence growth of the conscious state. It's something like that, possibly. I don't know. I just wonder and suppose. Thank you, Dad. You see, if you are to be an independent, glorious member of the host of heaven, you have to come with a separateness from God that's been nonetheless perfected, completed, such that you can be an adult in the heavenly host. You need to experience a separateness from God to be a separate being. But on the other hand, of course, the ideal is to be in absolute harmony with God and the host of heaven, so that you too don't suffer loneliness, but fellowship, eternal, glorious fellowship. So the childhood time is your separateness as conceived, separate from God, separate individual, but training, coming, progressing to being a harmony with all the host of heaven. And that's why in churches and organizations and so forth, people find relationships so demanding and so troublesome because, of course, they're not ready for heaven yet. They're learning, just like kids at school. They're absolutely horrible to each other at times, and they suffer and experience such and, well, develop a great aversion to such inharmony, but don't necessarily understand its cause, and so they need experience, training, if you like, so that they learn not to generate the inharmony themselves. And that's what life in this universe of uncertainty is about. It's a classroom. It's our childhood. And the marked absence of God is to give us that separateness and experience in separateness that we train to be a complete and wonderful person as our God is. Now, just a passing note, so to speak, when I talk about person, I don't mean persona. Persona is the role and how we present in the physical universe of uncertainty. And that changes with circumstance. You know, I might be playing the role of king or peasant, whatever. Whereas your personhood, I'm thinking as your separate but eternal being, because you're part of the eternal of God. Of course, you're in spiritual terms a genetic cell of his very self, developing as an independent self and developing into a harmony that we may experience full fellowship together. Your soul then is this self. It's that which you stand on, like the sole of your foot, if you like. It's your contact with the planet, your contact with, the body's physical contact with the earth is the sole of their feet. It's the bit that is in contact with. And our soul is that eternal contact with God, such that the prodigal can say, well, I'm my father's son. I'm going home. No matter what the passing persona may have been, my real personhood is an eternal being with God, riveted to him, if you like. The soul is the very riveting to him. It's not a physical thing. It's the spiritual binding that is eternal. In our terms, it is the relationship. You are quite simply your parent's child. That can never be changed. You may be mature or immature, but you are still your parent's child. You were born of God. That is eternal. And it is to say that God's genetic makeup is a part of who you are. And your experience of being here, being conceived into here, and your childhood here, generates your individuality that contributes to your personhood eternal in the host of heaven with our Heavenly Father, of course. Thank you, Dad.